Welcome back to another episode of Whispers of the Unknown. This is our 5th episode, and I'm excited to say that I have Kylie Cook with me yet again. Kylie, how are you?
Yet again. I'm doing super great, Gage.
Awesome. That's good to hear. Well, of course, we're going to be reading a story from the Unsolved Murders book, True Crime Cases Uncovered by Amber Hunt and Emily Thompson. Today we're going to be doing the Dorothy Jane Scott murder, also known as the 1980 phone calls from a killer.
I actually don't know if I know this one.
All right, so just to sum it up a little bit, Dorothy Jane Scott had been receiving crank calls for months before she was abducted.
Oof.
Then a mysterious man began calling her parents, boasting that he had kidnapped her or killed her.
Oh, that's not good.
Yeah. Well, let's get right into it then.
Let's.
All right. The telephone was ringing. Dorothy Jane Scott picked up the receiver with a degree of reluctance and wariness that had recently become habitual. "When I get you alone, I will cut you up into bits, so no one will ever find you," a male voice snarled down the line. Dorothy thought that the voice sounded vaguely familiar, but she could not place it. She had been receiving alarming phone calls from an unidentified man for several months.
Ooh, several months.
Several months, yeah.
That's
crazy.
That's not good. I feel like at that point I would have disconnected my phone
Or
or changed the number.
Call the police about it, maybe.
Yeah,
Maybe try to
well,
get
they don't
over.
necessarily do anything, to be honest.
Mm.
I'm going to guess it's probably what happened.
It's worth a shot, though. We'll find out what she did. Not only did he threaten her with violence, he would also seek to intimidate her by claiming to be watching her. Sometimes he was able to state where she was and what she was doing in great detail. On one occasion, Dorothy received a phone call from the man telling her to take a look outside. He told her that he had left her a gift. On her car windscreen was a single dead rose. Understandably, Dorothy was on high alert. It would soon transpire that she had every reason to be. That's crazy. A dead
That's
rose,
icky.
maybe symbolism for her being the rose. She's going to be dead.
Wow, what an astute observation.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're really putting your detective mind at work. I'm not even being facetious.
Whatever.
You're right.
Before these calls began to consume her every waking moment, Dorothy Scott lived a routine and settled life. She was a 32-year-old single mother living in Stanton, California, with her aunt and 4-year-old son.
No.
4-year-old son's name was Shanti. Dorothy was separated from Shanti's father, Dennis Terry, of Fairgrove, Missouri. During the week, Dorothy worked as a back office secretary at the jointly owned Swingers Psych Shop and Custom John's Head Shop in Anaheim while her parents looked after Shanti. After she finished work, Dorothy would pick her son up and drive back home and cook dinner. She and Shanti would then watch television or read a book together before bedtime. Dorothy, a devout Christian, very seldom dated, preferring a quiet night in with her son.
How nice.
Just a simple woman.
Mm-hmm.
She lived a very predictable life, but it was a life that she had carved out for herself in Shanti. She was known to be a hardworking and compassionate woman who cared deeply about her family. It's always the nice ones that
It is.
get murdered
It
the
always
hardest.
happens. You get murdered the hardest.
When it became clear that the disturbing calls weren't going to cease anytime soon, Dorothy decided to take up karate lessons.
Ooh, you
I-
go, Dorothy.
I personally would have probably just bought a gun or a big knife, but I don't know.
I don't know. She's a devout Christian. She probably doesn't want to kill anybody, but she wants to be able
Just
to
wants to
stand
go
her
to real
ground.
Okay. I see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
She considered purchasing a gun, but
Ta-da!
decided against it, fearing that Shanti might find it and harm himself.
Oh, see, she's a respectable woman. She's being responsible.
I feel like you could just get a safe, though. But I'm not here to judge
She's a single
anybody.
mother. How much money do you think she has?
However, she was determined to take steps to protect herself and her son. Protect herself and her son should her volatile stalker prove genuinely dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
On May 28th, 1980, Dorothy dropped Shanti off with her parents and then drove to work for an employee meeting. During the meeting, a colleague of hers, Conrad Bostron, mentioned that he had been feeling ill and showed Dorothy an inflamed wound on his arm. Dorothy urged Conrad to go to the UCI Medical Center to get it checked out and offered to take him there in her car.
No, don't be nice to people. Ever. Don't.
Another colleague, Pam Head, accompanied Dorothy and Conrad. En route to the UCI Medical Center, Dorothy stopped at her parents' home to check on her son and informed them that she may be late getting home. While there, she quickly changed her black scarf for a red scarf.
Interesting.
Interesting they'd add that in the story.
Yeah, I wonder what prominence that...
Yeah.
Maybe she was strangled. I don't know.
Oh, it's a
I don't
scarf.
know. That's just a guess. I don't even know what happened to her.
I don't know.
No one knows what happened to her. It's unsolved.
That's a good point. Well, they know what happened to her.
Oh,
probably.
well, yeah.
Conrad was examined by medical staff who found that his feelings of nausea and the wound on his arm had been caused by the bite of a spider.
Ah.
Dorothy and Pam sat in the waiting room watching television and reading magazines while Conrad received treatment for the bite.
Question. You might have said this. When does this take place?
1980.
Oh. Okay.
California. At approximately 11 p.m., Conrad was discharged, and they were ready to leave the hospital. Dorothy said she would fetch the car from the parking lot and meet them out front after they had Conrad's prescription filled.
I think I have heard this.
Yeah.
I don't think she ever comes back.
I'm going to assume that's what happened.
Oh.
Conrad and Pam briefly waited at the front of the building for their friend. When she didn't show up, they decided to walk over to the parking lot. Suddenly, seemingly out of nowhere. Suddenly, seemingly, synonyms, right? Kinda.
Suddenly, it seemed as though from out of nowhere, which is essentially what.
Suddenly, seemingly out of nowhere, Conrad and Pam saw Dorothy's white 1973 Toyota station wagon speed out of the parking lot and make a fast right turn around the corner, racing away from them. Its headlights were on high beam, so they were unable to catch a glimpse of who was behind the wheel. We waved our hands. There was no way she could have missed us. The car made a right. We started running after it, and it sped up, said Pam. Struggling to make sense of what had just transpired, Pam and Conrad considered that maybe there was an emergency back home. They waited 2 hours for Dorothy to return, but there was no sign of her. That's a long time to
I absolutely would have not. I would have not waited for that.
They notified the UCI police, who didn't seem alarmed. When Dorothy didn't return home that night to collect her son, her father, Jacob, and her mother, Vera, called the police to report her missing. In the early morning hours after her disappearance, Dorothy's burned-out car was discovered in an alley in Santa Ana.
I do know this case.
Yeah. Police declared that it had been deliberately been set alight, probably to destroy evidence. Dorothy was nowhere to be found. As an investigation into Dorothy's disappearance began, the police told her parents to keep details surrounding her disappearance private. This is a common police tactic when dealing with unsolved disappearances and murders to prevent possible suspects gleaning information about the crime from the media. Which we've seen some of before in some of the documentaries that we've watched, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what was that one in New York with the big guy?
Son of Sam?
Son of Sam, yeah. They, said a bunch of stuff in the media, right? That, kind of messed up the case.
Yeah, the media is always messing stuff up.
Mm-hmm. This ploy particularly helps detectives weed out suspects making false confessions. Dorothy's son's father was in Missouri at the time of her disappearance and thus excluded as a suspect. Just days later, the telephone at Jacob and Vera's home started to ring. "Are you related to Dorothy Scott?" the caller asked. "Yes," replied Vera. "Well, I've got her," an unidentified male voice exclaimed, before abruptly hanging up. The following week, determined not to keep quiet about his daughter's disappearance any longer, Jacob called the Register newspaper in Santa Ana, which is now the Orange County Register. The paper subsequently ran a story on Dorothy's disappearance. The same morning the story ran, the Register's managing editor, Pat Riley, received an ominous phone call. "She was my love. I caught her cheating with another man. She denied having someone else. I killed her."
Okay.
The voice on the line sobbed. Riley said that the man revealed details about Dorothy's disappearance that were not public knowledge. He somehow knew that Dorothy was at the UCI medical center with a friend who had been bitten by a spider. He also knew that Dorothy was wearing a red scarf and claimed that she had called him from the medical center. Huh. So it was someone that she knew? Claimed that she had called him.
I guess. I don't know.
So she talked to him before she left the hospital. Over the phone.
I guess. Do they have, like, payphones and stuff at hospitals?
Definitely.
Oh.
Anyway. Thanks for all the comments. Pam,
Sorry, I can not to like sidetrack. I can like hear music. Is it? I don't know.
No? Anyway, I've lost my thought. Pam refuted these claims and said that Dorothy had not called anybody that evening. She did, however, acknowledge that there was a brief moment that evening when she and Dorothy were not together, when Dorothy went to the bathroom shortly before going to the parking lot to retrieve the car. After a lot of years, you get a feeling about people, said Riley. He did sound genuine. On the night of the murder, it is likely that the kidnapper followed Dorothy and her work colleagues to the hospital and waited by her car. Perhaps seeing her entering the hospital with another man was enough to drive him into a frenzy. Oh, so he's jealous, huh? I wonder if he had, like, a real relationship with her, or if he was just,
I don't know. Well, she didn't...
Kind of like
said
a
that she wasn't
parasocial
super fond of relationships.
Yeah.
So maybe it was like something that he thought was something, but...
kind of like a stalkerish kind of thing.
Yeah, like definitely thought he was... It was more than it was.
Mm-hmm. The fact that Dorothy could not place the voice implied that it belonged to someone she had met in the past, not someone in her present life. It was conjectured that the kidnapper was someone Dorothy had slightly known in Missouri, who had followed her to Anaheim and discovered where she worked and lived. Alternatively, her kidnapper could have been a customer at one of the shops where she worked. Dorothy worked in the back office of both shops and had minimal contact with customers.
I doubt that. It would have been a customer then.
Yeah. Nevertheless, the kind of alternative lifestyle shops she worked in could have attracted some unusual characters. For 4 long, torturous years, Jacob and Vera Scott sporadically received taunting phone call after taunting phone call. These mostly came when Vera was home alone. The caller clearly had extensive knowledge about Dorothy and knew details about her disappearance that were never publicly released.
This dude needs to get a life.
Well, okay, this is 1980. I feel like by this time they would have been able to track phones, no? After, like, that many phone calls, I feel like...
I honestly have no idea.
Huh.
I can look that up, though, because now
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious.
Please. This left Dorothy's parents convinced that the caller was the same person who had harassed Dorothy and then abducted her. Police attempted to track the phone calls by tapping the Scott's phone. There we go.
Oh, well.
However, at no time did the mysterious caller remain on the line long enough for... I feel like every time I say something, it's like the next sentence. But they never remained on the line long enough for investigators to be able to trace the call. These persistent calls truly took their toll on the Scott family. This far down the road, if we can just get the body... If that's what he's done with her... Maybe we could go on and live a normal life, said Jacob. Sometimes the caller would claim that he was holding Dorothy captive and that she was still alive. Other times he would laugh and tell them that he had killed her. The calls stopped after Jacob Scott, instead of Vera, answered the telephone. On August 6, 1984, Jacob and Vera's worst fears were confirmed when a subcontractor for Pacific Bell stumbled across human remains while preparing to lay cables across Santa Ana Canyon Road. He discovered a human skull, pelvis, arm, and 2 thigh bones. Alongside the human remains was a woman's wristwatch as well as a turquoise ring. Dorothy's mother claimed that her daughter's wristwatch had stopped at 12:30 a.m. on May 29, 1980, a little over an hour after she vanished.
Oh.
Interesting. The remains were transported to the Orange County Coroner's Office, where they were identified as those of Dorothy Jane Scott by Dr. Robert Kelly via her dental records. 8 molars were present. They matched exactly with the dental records, he concluded. The pieces of jewelry that were found with the remains were identified as belonging to Dorothy, and days later it was publicly announced that she was a homicide victim. However, due to the severe deterioration of the bones, the cause of her death was impossible to be determined. According to the police, the mysterious caller who had tormented both Dorothy and her parents was the same man who abducted and murdered Dorothy. Yeah, obviously.
Good police work,
Yeah.
I guess.
Got Mr. Einstein over here. While it is relatively common for killers to reach out to law enforcement or to the media to receive recognition and publicity for their crimes, it is very rare for a killer to contact and torment the family members of their victim.
Really? I feel like I've heard of that in other cases.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not that I can remember specifically at the moment, but I'm pretty sure I've heard that before.
Yeah. This behavior indicates that Dorothy's killer truly was a sadistic individual who gained satisfaction from inciting fear.
Yeah.
Yeah. And after the news of the grim discovery circulated throughout the city, Jacob and Vera received one last phone call. Is Dorothy home?
Nope. Dorothy can't come to the phone right now. She's dead.
Killed her. This was the final call the killer ever placed to Dorothy's parents. Not only did he get away with murder, he also inflicted psychological torture on both Dorothy and her aging parents.
This dude's awful.
Despite numerous hypothetical explanations of the case, no suspects were ever named.
Ugh.
And Dorothy Scott's killer remains unidentified.
No.
That's crazy.
Oh, and her poor little boy.
Yeah, that is too bad.
That's so sad.
And Conrad had to walk all the way home from the hospital, probably. Can you believe that?
I'm sure. I'm
itchy
sure.
Spider bite.
I'm sure him and Pam probably got a ride from someone.
Well, that's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So always walk back to your car with someone else.
Yeah, personally, I would not. I'd be like, Pam, you and I are gonna go get the car. Conrad, you stay here with your spider bite.
100%.
Yeah. Ugh. And for him to and for it to go on years and years, and months and months, even leading up to her, being abducted.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
That is nuts. I wonder what kind. You think it was just a weird guy where they had one moment together where she just said hi to him or something and then he just got attached or something? Because I feel like if she had known who this guy was, then she would have known the voice probably after hearing it that many times.
Yeah. I don't know.
And I don't know. That's interesting. Well, do you have any other comments to make on the case?
Nope.
All right. Well, I guess we'll close out the phone call killer case. We'll be back tomorrow to make another episode, so stay tuned. I'll be posting another one soon. Thank you.